Hello peeps, it's a hillbilly halfwit. How are you today? And today we're just basically going to listen to an oncologist talking about convid. Nothing to do with me. He's the top guy in the UK. He was in the middle of, in the middle of making the AIDS vaccines and all sorts of stuff. Everybody, he's a well-respected guy. And I was listening to him this morning. Just think it needs sharing. There's no point me talking about it because this guy is obviously so good at this subject, it makes me look like an idiot. So I'll just put him on in a couple of seconds and you can see what you think about what he thinks about convid and the jab. So here's our great leader, yeah. Everything is far right as usual. And I just have to read this out. The content in this video is intended for comedic purposes only. The views expressed in this video are not to be taken as factual information or a representation of my personal beliefs. I am critically reviewing the info and videos I show as examples. So here we are. Listen to this guy. And it's only about 5 or 6 minutes long, but it says everything in there.
She's a clinical oncologist, and it's been a bit of a problem because I've been dismissed when I've said sensible things. Oh, he's only a clinical doctor. But these people forget that I was there at the beginning with HIV, and I was there in 1984 when Fauci promised a vaccine in 18 months' time, and 40 years later we still don't have it. So I've been through all this, and I was a co-discoverer of the CD4 receptor, which is how I got involved in COVID in the first place. That my colleagues, collaborators, with whom we'd actually done a very good HIV vaccine, and we've published and everything on it, Fauci continued to ignore it for reasons I've only just started to realise more recently. But we are asked to help do a vaccine along the same lines. And my first thing with vaccine is less is more. The less you put into the vaccine, the more likely it is to work. And everybody went for the spike protein. Now, when we analysed the spike protein, we found it had, and we wrote this all down, we had terrible trouble publishing it. We couldn't publish it for 3 months. It was turned down by every journal. We found out there were 6 inserts plus the furin cleavage site. And the importance of this is these inserts all gave the virus a charge of a pH of 8 as opposed to normal of 6, which meant it was highly charged and acted like a fridge magnet going onto the fridge, with really hyper infectability for human cells. The second thing that we did was blast analysis, and we pointed out the spike protein had 80% homology to human epitopes, and some of these were virtually 100%, like platelet factor 4, which would give you horrible clotting issues, and myelin, which would give you Guillain-Barré, etc. All these things have turned out to be true. We prepared a document, we gave it to our government here through Gove. I know it was discussed in Cabinet, went to Sage, Whitty and Valence, and they all decided to ignore it. So that's where I came from. So I was furious about that because we knew there would be significant side effects. It was just how bad would it be? Well, step forward, we know that we had the problems, and Peter was the first to call the myocarditis, stroke problems, etc. And others came out with a variety of things. And when they started to roll the vaccine down to the 50s and 40s, I mean, I protested like mad and went berserk when they suggested giving it to children, when it was the average age of death was 82. I mean, the whole thing was like a dystopian Orwellian nightmare we were descending into. But what brought me into this group very much was the boosters. And I've done a lot of work in vaccines over the year, the Institute of Cancer Vaccines Immunotherapy, which I'm a principal of. And we have an adage that if a vaccine needs a booster, it doesn't work. And my goodness, does that never be more true than in this case? And patients who have been given these boosters, which I said were boosting against a virus that left the planet at least a year ago, and because it was a Coxsackie virus, anybody who's read the history of Coxsackie virus development knows you get a thing called antigenic sin, or immunological imprinting. So it doesn't matter how many variants you vaccinate against, the immune system only sees the first virus that's disappeared. So it just produces lots of useless antibodies. But more importantly, the booster suppresses the T-cell response. And that's where I came in. I started to see in my melanoma clinic patients who'd been stable for years who suddenly came in relapsed sometimes the relapse was quite vicious. I mean, they had very bad disease. We had to retreat them all over again. And the only thing they had in common, we're used to severe depression, divorce, debt, bereavement, etc., suppressing the immune system and losing control of the cancers. But none of my patients had this whatsoever. They'd all been bullied by their GPs to have a booster just to be safe. And then I found that there were a lot of people coming down with lymphomas, leukemias, all of them had the booster. And I had 3 friends who only had the booster so they could travel after being locked down for 2-3 years. All 3 of them have relapsed and 2 of them have died. So we couldn't even treat these cancers. That was the other big. They didn't even respond to the standard treatment. So that is why I've got really, really vocal. I believe that using messenger RNA technology for infectious disease is basically a gross medical negligence. It really is criminal negligence, now knowing what we do. And it's even worse, the fact that every time I've raised it with everybody, I've been carpeted by the hospital, been carpeted by the Royal College of Physicians, told to be quiet and that I'm upsetting the patients. And I said, no, I'm not upsetting the patients. I'm doing my job. First, do no harm. And I am, like the canary in the gold mine, I am seeing harm. We must stop now. So I'll just leave that as my message and a big stop there.
So there we are. You've seen the guy there. He's in the top handful of people who have been making these things for decades. And he was one of the top handful of people who made the AIDS vaccine. Saying it all for you. I don't need to say anything else because he's obviously a boffin and knows his stuff. And the bit after this, he was talking about how lots of doctors around the world were contacting him after he came out about these things and how they were seeing the same effects, but were basically being stopped from saying anything. And this huge uptake in cancer things and stuff like that, and it just needs to be out there. So I'm not going to add much more to this. It's only that yesterday I shared a video about the tagging, and when I shared it on Facebook, it had actually removed my thumbnail. So it was being shared and shadow banned. Very weird. I haven't seen that done before. So obviously we hit a nerve yesterday. So please subscribe for more stuff like this because it needs to be out there. I know we get suppressed, but you need to get this information out there so people know what's going on. All the best, guys.